First off, I want to thank Pastor for asking me to preach, and also for not getting me mixed up in the whole switcheroo when Brother Lohan couldn't preach, because I wasn't ready. I'm not ready now, and I wasn't ready then. Turn to 1 Kings chapter 17. 1 Kings chapter 17. I'll get there too in a minute. 1 Kings 17, and we're going to start reading in you know what? I'll get there. I was in the wrong book again. There we go. This looks right now. Yes, sir. We'll get there. Okay, we'll start reading verse 10. So he arose and went to Zarephath, and when he came to the gate of the city, behold, the widow woman was there gathering of sticks. And he called to her and said, "Fetch me, I pray thee, a little water in a vessel that I may drink. And as she was going to fetch it, he called to her and said, Bring me, I pray thee, a morsel of bread in thine hand. And she said, As the Lord thy God liveth, I have not a cake, but an handful of meal in a barrel, and a little oil in a cruse. And behold, I am gathering 2 sticks, that I may go in and dress it for me and my son, that we may eat it and die. And Elijah said unto her, Fear not, go and do as thou hast said, but make me thereof a little cake first, and bring it unto me, and after make it for thee and for thy son. Of course, you want me to read more, don't you? That's a pretty mean thing to do, isn't it? I mean, the prophet saying, yeah. You can do what you said. You can make that last meal for you and your son, make that and die. But first, make me some. Without the promise in the next verse, Elijah, he would have some more faults than we know he has. Verse 14, For thus saith the Lord God of Israel, The barrel of meal shall not waste, neither shall the cruse of oil fail, until the day that the Lord sendeth rain upon the earth. And she went and did according to the saying of Elijah, and she and he and her house did eat many days. And the barrel of meal wasted not, neither did the cruse of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by Elijah. Yes, that is one of those passages that you just can't stop in the middle of. It changes the way you look at a man of God. It changes the way you look at the story. Today's message, the message I have tonight, is big lessons from little things. Some big lessons from little things. And my first point is a little snack. Just a little snack. She had enough that she didn't expect that they were going to last very long. She said, I'm just grabbing these 2 sticks. Doesn't take a whole lot of food to be cooked by just 2 sticks. My boys and I were camping recently. We went through a pile of wood to keep ourselves warm and to cook. And we cooked a whole lot more than what 2 sticks could cook. I mean, we had, it was a feast. Every meal, we were just full to the brim. It's amazing what they can eat now. They're growing up, eating us out of house and home. Speaking of eating us out of house and home, did you know that what Adam told his children when they said, Mom, Dad, why aren't we living in the garden anymore? Adam said, well, because your mom, we got eaten out of house and home. Many years later, he was still blaming his wife for that. But yeah, so the widow of Zarephath was about to make the last meal for her and her son when the prophet asked, could you take care of us first? It seems in verse 12 that she knew who he was, because she said in verse 12, and she said, as the Lord thy God liveth. So she knew something, possibly even knew that this was Elijah, the man of God. I believe that she did. As the Lord thy God liveth, I have not a cake. But wait a second. In verse 13, that's exactly what he asked for. She says, I don't have a cake. He's like, hey, Go make me a cake. What? I just said I don't have it, man. He can't hear what's being said, but it's not true. That's not true at all. He wanted to test her faith. Now, somebody telling you, just imagine if nowadays, you go shopping and you spend like $300 and you come out with a box of Cheerios and a half a gallon of milk to go with it. But just imagine that she has no money left, right? Because she has no food, she has no money to buy more food, she has to go out and get some wood and make her last meal. And when she has absolutely nothing left, he says, don't worry, the little that you have is going to last for as long as you need it to last. But first take care of me. And the lesson here, the big lesson from this little bit of oil and this little bit of meal and this little snack that she made with it is to give to God first. You know, a lot of people in their plenty have no problem giving to God. Recently, during our business meeting, we talked and we voted on giving money to Bearing Precious Seed Canada, that's sending John and Romans to every household in Canada. My wife and I used to be a part of the church that does that. And even back then, there's this rich American businessman who matches dollar for dollar. Whatever's donated, he gives $1 as well. That guy's giving out of his plenty, for sure, because plenty comes in. Now, if you don't have the money, you can't give it. But a lot of people would get to a point in their life where they say, I can't afford to give. Maybe they would say, okay, I'll tithe for now because I can afford to, I know I have to tithe. But when a missionary comes or somebody's going on a missions trip, I'm not going to give that extra. I just can't afford to do that for the work of God. Listen, this is all I've got. And if I give out of this, I'm going to die. That's probably not literally what's going to happen if you give a little bit more. But that's what this lady was saying. What I have isn't even enough to sustain my life and my child's life for more than a day or two. Until our digestive system works this through, and then we starve and die. And I said, yeah, but trust me. God says, what little you have, if you take care of me first, will last as long as you need. What would have happened if she would have said no? She would have died, right? I mean, God would not have provided for her and her son if she said, no, I just can't afford to give to the man of God. Now, I know we take really good care of our pastor and of all the speakers that come in. And that is a blessing to see, and it's a blessing to be a part of. I just want to challenge you to make sure that you keep that a priority. A big lesson from this little snack that she gave Elijah before she took care of herself is to make sure that you give to God first. Secondly, a little servant. You'll notice there's L and S. They're all going to be that way. I got to get creative later on. You'll see. A little servant. Turn to 2 Kings. Just one book over. 2 Kings chapter 5. This morning I was illuminated. I understood. I had a revelation on why the message that I'd been working on just could not come together. And I was sitting there all day trying to just piece this thing together. And then it didn't work. It wasn't this message. It was a different one. It didn't work. So I pulled out a different one that I had started a long time ago, and it came together right away. And I thought, man, that's weird. And then this morning, Kaylin says, can you turn to Judges chapter 16? I was like, Samson? Oh, that's what I was going to preach on. So isn't that amazing? And then the young people said that Samson was part of the messages there too. So I guess you've had enough of Samson. We're going to steer clear of Samson today, and we're just going to preach on this other stuff. So a little servant in 2 Kings chapter 5. And we'll start in verse 1. Now Naaman, captain of the host of the king of Syria was a great man with his master, and honorable, because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man in valor, but he was a leper. And the Syrians had gone out by companies, and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid. And she waited on Naaman's wife. And she said unto her mistress, Would God, my Lord, were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover him of his leprosy. And one went in and told his Lord, saying, Thus and thus said the maid that is of the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, Go. Well, he said, Go. We're going to stop there. And the king of Syria said, Go. So told Naaman, Go and do what you've heard that this young maid has said. The little servant. So this maid, imagine this. We could pick one of the girls that was up here singing with Master Club, whether it was the oldest or the youngest, or maybe a few years older, probably not a few years younger, because she would have had to do things as a servant, be capable of doing things. But this maid, she got taken from her home. But let's not sugarcoat it. She was abducted. She was kidnapped. She didn't have any of her family there. She was all alone in a foreign land, probably didn't speak the language, and made to do things in a strange place against her will. Like, I'm sure she had to make the decision, okay, am I going to, serve this lady, pour the water for her and all that, or get beaten and maybe even put in prison. Or if you continue rebelliously, I'm sure they didn't treat servants or slaves that well, and maybe she would be even executed for not doing what she was told to do. But think about, imagine how that would have been. You're, just in the backyard in Israel playing, I don't know, with rocks and sticks, or maybe she had a little doll or something. And this horde of Syrians comes in on their big horses, and there's dust clouds and everything, and people are screaming and running for cover, and all of a sudden she's just standing there, doesn't know what to do, and all of a sudden some guy just comes along and just grabs her by the back of the neck or the robe and just under the arm, and away they go. Now, it doesn't say that nobody else was taken, but it does just mention her. And had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid. Not necessarily saying nobody else was taken away, but she's very much alone. It's not like when it mentions Daniel and the other young men that were taken away, right? And names them right away. He's got a support group, this group of guys, and hey, together we're going to eat pulse, and we're not going to do the things that the king wants us to do. It appears that she's all alone, quite likely scared. I would think she would be scared. When she's there, she had opportunity to become bitter. Bitter against God. Bitter against, well, maybe Naaman, right? He's the general. He's the reason why she's there. If he wasn't this valiant man leading raids into Israel and taking captive, then she wouldn't be there. She'd be at home with her family. And here she is, and it goes, we really don't know how much time it is between verse 2, where it says at the end of or in the middle of verse 2, and brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. She waited on Naaman's wife. So she gets taken away, and right away it says she was waiting on Naaman's wife. So she goes right from being free to serving. And then not just to serving, because the very next verse she says, and she said unto her mistress, Would God, my Lord, were with the prophet that is in Samaria. What's the little lesson, or the big lesson we can get from the little servant? Well, love your neighbor. Love your enemy. There's no, in verse 2 she says, So she had no bitter spirit or rebellious attitude. Do you think that you would be like that if you were taken from home? I likely would have a hard time loving the person who's responsible for me being taken away from my family. Love your enemy. She lived out the lesson in Matthew chapter 5, verse 44, where Christ says, "But I say unto you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you. And pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you." That's a pretty big lesson to learn. I mean, she hadn't heard that verse because it hadn't been said yet. But this little girl, she just still cared. Maybe Naaman was nice. Maybe he wasn't. I mean, he is kidnapping little girls. But possibly he was kind to the people that he kidnapped. But even still, she didn't have to be nice. She didn't have to show love. But she did. She wanted what was good for Naaman just for the sake of what's good. What's good for somebody else. The little lesson, or the big lesson from a little servant is to love your enemies. I quoted from Matthew. We're going to head there next. Matthew chapter 14. Matthew chapter 14. We'll start reading in verse 23, Matthew 14, 23. "And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when even was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a spirit. And they cried out for fear. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid and began to sink. And beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. Third point is a big lesson in a little stock. There you go. Stock? Well, yes. If you put stock in something, the definition of putting stock in something is to have confidence or faith in someone or something. I liked the examples that they gave for you to see how it's used in a sentence. He put a lot of stock in her ability to get the job done. I don't put much stock in rumors, and this one here is my favorite. I'm willing to put some stock in those polls since they've been accurate before. Well, that's not likely, but it is a proper use of the word. Peter did put stock in Jesus really being there in the storm. At first they thought, it's just a ghost. This is an illusion. We're seeing things that aren't even real. It's a ghost. And when Jesus said, no, in verse 27, be of good cheer, it is I. Notice how he didn't say it is Jesus? It's like a shepherd. My sheep know my voice. It is I. Be not afraid. Right then, everyone in that boat had to make a decision. Well, do you believe your eyes? or do you believe your ears? Because when their eyes saw Jesus, they saw a ghost. Or they thought what they saw was a ghost. And then Jesus said, no, don't be afraid. It's me. Be of good cheer. It is I, be not afraid. Peter answered and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. And he said, come. And then Peter put a little stock into what Jesus said. Now we know it was a little stock because of what happens next. As a result of his little faith, or putting stock in this truth that Jesus was really there, Peter was able to walk on the water. He was able to have a supernatural path before him. Something impossible, something that the other guys in that boat never experienced. They didn't even have enough stock. And you know what? It's crazy. They didn't even have enough faith that Jesus was who he said he was, even after Peter was walking on the water. Like you would think, if you were there, wouldn't you? You might not be the first one out of the boat, right? But after Peter, the crazy guy, is on the water, well, I mean, he's walking, and he got at least some distance from the boat, because when he started sinking, he didn't turn around for the boat, right? He kept, Jesus saved me, not, hey guys, throw me a line. So when Peter stepped out of that boat and started walking to Jesus, what were those other guys thinking? I just can't put stock in Jesus being who he says he is out there. Even though other people are following him, I see examples of other people stepping out in faith, but I'm not going to do it. I can't put stock in that. There's a big lesson to learn from that little bit of stock that Peter put into Jesus' presence. Now, if we walk in faith, even just a little faith, our path can lead us through supernatural experiences too. We can have peace in the storm. We can see God work miracles, and we can point others to Christ. What greater miracle is there than that? We know Rob Craig put stock in his calling to Italy, right? He didn't travel all over the United States and Canada without faith. He believed. That was an example. God called, I'm going. I'm going to do it in record time. And he did. And he got there. And what happened? There's a person who decided to put their trust in Jesus Christ because he went there. Now, if all of that was for one, I've heard Rob say, it was worth it. As tough as that would be to do so much for so little, that one soul. That's supernatural. Think about that guy over there, whatever his name is, Fabricio or some, I don't know, Italian name. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Give me one. Italian. Huh? Palermo's the town that he went to. I was thinking of the guy. Anyways, I'm trying to make up an Italian name. I don't even know. Fabricio would be Greek, I guess. I don't know. Mussolini. Probably we'll do a different one. We'll just call him Frank. So this guy over there, think about this. He would have not, naturally speaking, there's no way that we could come to the conclusion that he would have got saved some other way. It's possible. God can work in whichever way he wants to work. But you can be an instrument in that work, or you can stay in the boat. Right? You can follow other people's examples and put a little stock in God promising, I'm here. Don't be afraid. Be of good cheer, in fact, in this storm. It goes completely against what we want to do. But in this storm, just put a little stock in the fact that I said I'm here. And then step out. Get out of that boat and walk. Take one step, 2 steps. Walk towards Christ. And if you sink, don't turn back to the boat. Call out to Christ. Lord, save me. like Peter did. Just, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? But man, how he was able to experience for that short time by putting just a little stock in Jesus being there in the storm. Number four, we're going to turn over one book to Luke. No, a couple books, sorry. I have a different one. Number 4, Luke chapter 19. Luke chapter 19. And we're going to start reading in verse 1. And Jesus entered and passed through Jericho. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, which was chief among the publicans, and he was rich. And he sought to see Jesus, who he was, and could not for the press, because he was of little stature. And he ran before and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him, and said unto him, Zacchaeus, make haste, and come down, for today I must abide at thy house. And he made haste, and came down, and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all murmured, saying, that he was gone to be guest with a man that is a sinner. Now I could have called this point a little sinner, but I didn't want to. I think it's better to call him a little shyster. Oh, you wouldn't say. Yes, well, I looked up the definition of shyster, and it's a person, especially a lawyer. I don't know why it has to point that out. But anyways, who uses unscrupulous, fraudulent, or deceptive methods in business. I mean, that's Zacchaeus, right? He was robbing people. We know this because he confesses it to Jesus in a couple of verses. I have defrauded people. I've taken things. So we're going to continue. Yeah, from verse 7, I thought it could be a little sinner, but that just didn't have as much zing. And Zacchaeus, in verse 8, and Zacchaeus stood and said unto the Lord, Behold, my Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I have taken any from any man by false accusation, I restore him fourfold. And Jesus said unto him, This day is salvation come to this house, for so much as he is also a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which was lost. So Zacchaeus was a wee little man. No, I'm going to start singing now. So Zacchaeus was a little man who cheated many while working as a publican. There was somebody sitting at that table that day, eating with Zacchaeus and Jesus, who was jealous of Zacchaeus. I heard it. Judas. Can you imagine Judas sitting there? I mean, we know later on, Judas is mad because an alabaster box is broken. And we could have sold that 300 penny worth. But in this meal, Judas is sitting there looking around and going, this guy's got it made. I mean, look at this. He's got everything. I like this guy. And then all of a sudden this guy stands up and, raps on the glass or whatever, get people's attention. And somebody says, yeah, stand up, say what you want to say. And he says, I am standing. Oh, sorry, I forgot. But he says, you know what? I'm going to give half my goods to the poor. Judas. Can you imagine? He probably got red in the face mad. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I'm not allowed to say that word anymore. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Oh no, and then also I'm going to give back anything I've taken from somebody fraudulently by false accusation and restore him. Oh, fourfold. Fourfold? You took $1 from somebody, you're going to give him 4? That's crazy. This has nothing to do with my point. But I was just thinking, Judas was just sitting there seething because he saw the riches. We know that he was after money, right? He carried the purse and he sold the Savior for 30 pieces of silver. I guarantee you, Zacchaeus had more than 30 pieces of silver. If he was willing to sell Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, I wonder what he would have done for all the riches that Zacchaeus had. He would have been just as fraudulent or dishonest as Zacchaeus. I can just imagine him sitting there seething. You know, there's a lot of Christians today that are looking at what the world has, and they're metaphorically eating meals with the Savior. And they're looking at the world and going, yeah, but I want what he has. I mean, this is nice, but can't I have all this instead? How about you? I mean, that's not even my point, but that's a big lesson from a little slime ball. We'll throw that one in. Okay? We're bumping Zacchaeus right now. This little slime ball, he's sitting there and he's willing to throw away everything that he can have if he just sticks with Jesus. In the future, he does. He throws it all away. And he's sitting there, and if I was a betting man, I would bet you this bothered him. I mean, that's who he is. He's a trader. He's after the money, and he's willing to throw it all away, and later he does, just for a little bit of money. What would you throw away? Your reputation, your testimony, just for a little bit of money? That's... Okay, let's get back on track here. In verse 2, look at verse 2 again. It says, "And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, which was chief among the publicans." So he had position, this guy, Zacchaeus. He had position. He had stature. Not literally, figuratively, he had stature in the community. Small guy, but he had he had position and riches on top of that. He had everything the world could offer him. The Romans gave him authority, power to take money from other people. It's like working for the CRA. Did you guys see, side note, rabbit trail, did you see the CRA is not even investigating everyone who defrauded them of the money during the COVID lockdowns? That's my money. I want you to get it back, right? It's our taxes. It boils my blood. Glad they won't be investigating, though. Whew. No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't take a dime of that. Anyways, back on track. So Zacchaeus, he works for the CRA, right? He's the tax collector, but here's the difference. There's no rules. If he goes up to your house, you got to give let's say, 1 silver coin. But he walks up to your house and, hey, you're doing pretty good. He's just got to walk up and say, you owe 2 silver coins. What? No, it was 1 last year. Just inflation. You know? And then you got to pay 2. And if you don't, throws you off to jail. See, he's got power. Imagine that power. The authority that he has. People don't want to double cross him. They might not like him because, you know, they often name publicans and sinners in the same verse, right? The Bible says, publicans, a friend of publicans and sinners. Well, they might not like him, but he does have some authority and some position in his community. He could imprison people who refused to pay. He not just was a publican, but he was chief among publicans. He was the top dog. Well, it's like a chihuahua, you know, that thinks they're the top dog, this little dog thinks he's the top. That's Zacchaeus, but he really was the chief. And even though he had it all, he longed for something more. Maybe he heard about Jesus from that cripple that couldn't work, but now has his job back and can work. Or maybe that leper who was ostracized is now back working in the shop next door to Zacchaeus' office. And he hears about this Jesus guy. All we know, we don't know how he learned, but all we know is that when he heard Jesus was coming that way, that was what he wanted to do. He didn't want to go collect more money from the people. He didn't want to go defraud somebody else of their tax money. No, he didn't want to sit in his nice house and eat his wonderful food. No, he was willing to go, wanting to go see Jesus. That was the utmost important thing. The most important thing, even though he had everything materially that you could have, he wanted to see Jesus. And when he couldn't get there because of the press, he went and put a little more effort in. He went ahead and he climbed a tree just to see, who is this guy I keep hearing about? And when Zacchaeus climbed that tree and Jesus came underneath that tree, looked up, saw him, called him, Zacchaeus rushed down. He made haste, it says. He made haste in verse 6 and came down and received him joyfully. I grew up in church. A lot of people here grew up in this church or another church. Do you receive Jesus joyfully? Or just kind of meh? I know that it's sometimes easy to get a little lackadaisical, a little, well, here we go again, going back to church again, and don't really, I guess, I don't want other people to think that maybe I'm slipping or, can't go to church today. I'll be at work tomorrow, though, but it's really getting me. I just need one day off. Zacchaeus received Jesus joyfully. Zacchaeus wanted desperately to see who Jesus was, and when Jesus called him, he received him joyfully. Isn't it amazing how many Christians don't? You can't hardly get them to come to church, how much less climb a tree. Well, we're not going to ask anybody to climb trees, especially not most of the trees we have around here, the spruce trees. That'd be difficult. But what effort would you put in to see Jesus and to serve him? This is a lesson for all of us. It's a lesson for me because it's easy to just put in the bare minimum. It's easy to just do what you got to do because you feel like you have to do it and not do it joyfully. The big lesson from this little shyster is that all that the world can offer is nothing. Knowing Jesus is everything. Zacchaeus wanted to give up everything so he could sit down and get to know Jesus. Judas sat down and knew Jesus every day. And he wanted to give that all up for the world. Pretty big lesson for me. I hope for you as well. I'll recap. We have a big lesson from a little snack. Do you give to God first? Not just money, but your time, your efforts, your energy? Or is it just the last thing that you can do? Is to give to God. Make it the first thing. Secondly, a little servant. Do you love those who you would consider, could be considered your enemy? Those who despitefully use you and mistreat you? Do you love them? As Christ said in Matthew 5:44, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, and do good to them that hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and persecute you. And then a little stock, a little bit of faith that Jesus is there. He says he's there in the storm, right? He was there in the fiery furnace. He's there in the storm. Step out. Put a little stock that Jesus is there. And he says, come walk on the water. Let's do amazing things together. Just me and you, Peter. The little, what did I call him? Slime ball. Judas. Are you willing to give up everything? Your testimony, your walk with God, just to taste the world? Taste a little bit of that? And a little shyster who's willing to give that all up. I will give back everything and more because I know you now, Jesus. And Jesus said salvation is coming to this house. Big lessons from some little things. I hope that's been an encouragement. Let's pray. Lord, I do pray that these little thoughts have been an encouragement, a challenge as they have been to me. And thank you, Lord, for giving me the words to speak. And I pray that the lessons will continue to resonate for a long time in my life. And